So you wanted to get a clearer picture of racial disparities in America, huh?
Well, we dove into this fascinating chapter, like really fascinating, from the book Race and Social Problems, Restructuring Inequality. And it came out of this huge conference, tons of experts, so we know it's the real deal. Let me tell you, it paints a stark picture of where things stand,
Yeah.
So we're going to walk through some key areas where things are really unequal.
Okay.
And then we'll try to explore like why these gaps are so hard to close. Sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So it's not just a historical overview, right?
Right.
It's about how those problems in the past continue to like affect people today, like right now.
Yeah. It's like
Like
the past isn't really past. It's still here with us.
Exactly. Yeah. It's baked into the present.
Okay.
So first up, health.
Okay.
And this one just blew me away, honestly.
Yeah.
We hear about life expectancy all the time, right?
Yeah.
But in areas with a lot of homicides, Asian American women, they live 20.7 years longer than Black men.
Wow.
That's longer than some people's entire careers.
That's incredible. It really is.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning, really. Black infants, more than twice as likely to die as white infants.
Jeez.
And then you have disparities in, well, everything. Obesity, diabetes, HIV, all significant.
Right.
And it's crucial, like really crucial to understand that these aren't just individual choices,
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, telling someone, oh, you should eat better doesn't really matter if their neighborhood doesn't even have a grocery store with fresh food.
Exactly.
So like what are the bigger factors at play here?
Yeah. It's about the circumstances people are born into, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like segregation,
Uh-huh.
poverty. These mean different access to health care, to healthy foods, to safe environments. All of it impacts health outcomes.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have family structure.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference in two-parent households. Like huge.
Yeah.
85% for Asian families.
Okay. But only 39% for Black families.
Wow.
Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, the book's not making a moral judgment here, okay?
Uh-huh.
It's about how likely you are to be in certain family structures based on, factors outside your control.
Yeah. You can't really choose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you add in the fact that kids in single mother families are way, way more likely to experience poverty.
Mm-hmm.
It's 45% versus 13% for two-parent households.
Yeah.
You can really see how this impacts everything.
It's like a domino effect. So it's not about blaming single parents. It's about asking why those family structures are, more prevalent in the first place. Mm-hmm. What's the system doing or not doing that makes that stability harder to achieve?
Right, yeah.
Okay. Now, for something I hadn't really thought about before, residential segregation.
Okay.
So they use this thing called the dissimilarity index. Basically, it's like how many people would have to move to make a city racially balanced,
Okay, yeah.
High index, lots of segregation.
Makes sense.
Milwaukee and Chicago are way up there.
Really highlights how segregated our cities still are.
Yeah, it's but what's even more striking is this. The typical white person lives in a neighborhood that's 79% white.
Okay.
But the U.S. as a whole, only 64% white.
Hold up. So even though the country is becoming more diverse, people are still mostly living in, like, white areas.
Right.
Doesn't that make the segregation worse?
It suggests that, yes, segregation isn't just a leftover from the past. It's actively happening, through the choices people make about where to live and through policies that reinforce those choices. And for Black communities, this often means concentrated poverty, on top of the challenges they're already facing.
It's a vicious cycle.
Okay.
All right, ready for some economic reality?
Oh, boy.
I'm just going to rapid fire some stats because they're pretty shocking.
Okay.
Black men's earnings.
Yeah.
Way lower than white men's. And the gap has actually widened since 1980.
Wow.
Then there's the home ownership gap. 74% of white families own a home versus 45% of Black families.
A huge gap, yeah. And for single women, the wealth difference is it's staggering. White single women have a median wealth of $41,500.
Okay.
Black single women have $100.
Oh, my gosh.
And half of Black and Hispanic single women, they have zero or negative net worth.
Negative.
Negative. That means they're in debt, not just without savings. This is way beyond needing to budget better, It's a whole different playing field.
Absolutely. And those economic disparities, they have a long-lasting impact. They affect everything. Access to quality education,
Yeah.
healthcare, the ability to save for retirement or for a down payment on a house.
It's not just about the individual either. 65% of Black and Hispanic children live in low-income families compared to 31% of white children. That connects back to the family structure point we talked about, right? Like, poverty makes that stability harder to have.
Absolutely. These economic disparities, they cast a long shadow over whole communities.
Yeah.
And across generations. It's a cycle that's really hard to break free from.
Okay, so we've seen how unequal things are right now.
Yeah.
But the book doesn't just leave it at that. It digs into why these gaps still exist.
Right.
And honestly, this is where it gets like really thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It's easy to think racism is a thing of the past, right?
Right.
Like slavery, Jim Crow, all that.
Yeah.
But the reality is that those policies, they had consequences. They're still playing out today.
Exactly. Yeah. They didn't just
Wow.
disappear.
So past racism isn't just history. It's like actively shaping the present.
Yeah, it's baked in.
Okay, can you give me an example of that?
Sure. So think about the New Deal.
Okay.
All those programs from the Great Depression.
Yeah.
They were meant to help people get back on their feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they were often structured in ways that excluded Black people. Access to housing loans, job training, even Social Security benefits.
Wow.
Those were often denied to Black families.
So while white families were getting this help, Black families were being left out.
Essentially, yeah.
That's messed up.
It is.
But how do we know that this is still affecting people today?
Well, it created like a foundation of wealth and opportunity for white families that Black families just didn't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And that difference in wealth, that difference in opportunity, it gets passed down through generations.
Like inheriting disadvantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about it. If your grandparents couldn't buy a house because of redlining,
Right.
they couldn't pass that asset down to your parents.
Yeah.
And now you're starting from behind.
Wow. So it's like, yeah, you said it. It's like a domino effect.
Right.
Okay. But the book also talks about how segregation and poverty kind of concentrate disadvantage. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. So forced segregation,
Mhm.
especially through things like, redlining,
Right.
it created these urban ghettos.
Yeah.
And then as manufacturing jobs declined, those areas were the ones hit the hardest.
Makes sense.
It's a cycle, you see.
Yeah.
Job losses lead to poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Poverty leads to fewer opportunities.
And so on.
And so on, yeah.
So it's not just, bad luck or bad individual choices. It's like the system itself makes it harder to get ahead in those neighborhoods.
Like it's the context, yeah.
Yeah, the context.
And then you layer on top of that, discrimination,
Oh, right.
which is still happening.
Of course.
The book talks about how Black home buyers face bias at every step.
Really?
From real estate agents to loan officers, it's everywhere.
So even if they're qualified for a loan, they might not get it.
Right.
Or they might get offered worse terms.
Exactly.
It's like they're trying to climb a ladder that keeps getting pulled away.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, they're trapped in neighborhoods with declining values and fewer opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's not just housing either, right? It's jobs too.
Absolutely.
Studies show that even with the same qualifications, Black applicants are less likely to get called back for interviews.
Less than half the time, actually.
Wow. So even when they're like trying to play in the rules, the system's working against them. It's a rigged game.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
And then there's the whole mass incarceration issue.
Right, which has been devastating for Black communities.
Yeah.
It's not just about crime. It's about who gets targeted for what.
Uh-huh.
Unfair drug laws, racial bias in policing, these harsh sentencing practices.
Yeah.
All of these things contribute to the fact that Black men are overrepresented in the system.
Way overrepresented.
The book points out that Black people are way more likely to be arrested and sentenced for drug offenses.
Yeah.
Even though their usage rates are similar to other groups.
Yeah, I remember reading that. That's just...
It doesn't add up, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Something's not right there.
No, something's definitely off.
And the consequences of incarceration, well, they're far-reaching.
Yeah.
Lost income, family separation, difficulty finding housing, getting a job.
Yeah.
All of this contributes to those disparities we talked about earlier.
Right. So it's not just about the time served. It's about the impact on their lives and on their communities, long term.
Absolutely. It's like the system keeps pulling people back down even after they've served their time.
Right. Like they can never really escape.
It's a tough reality.
This is heavy stuff,
Yeah, it really is.
Like we've been talking about all these huge systems and statistics,
Right.
but it's easy to forget that we're talking about real people's lives. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Mm.
These aren't just numbers on a page.
Right.
They represent families, struggling with limited choices, facing obstacles that many of us can't even imagine.
Yeah, and it's not just a black and white issue either. Right. I mean,
Right.
the book focuses on that, but what about other racial and ethnic groups?
Yeah.
Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans.
They all face their own challenges.
Exactly. They all have their own struggles.
Reducing disparities, it requires us to understand the unique challenges each group faces.
Right.
Latinos, for instance,
Yeah.
they often encounter language discrimination
Yeah.
and obstacles related to immigration status.
Of course, yeah. And I know Asian Americans, even though they're sometimes called the model minority, they
Right.
still deal with stereotypes and discrimination.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that label itself, it's harmful.
Mhm.
It ignores the diversity within the Asian American community
Yeah.
and the very real struggles many face.
And then you have Native Americans
Yeah.
who are dealing with the legacy of colonialism, ongoing poverty.
Lack of access to basic resources.
It's like each group has its own story, right,
Uh.
of how these systems impact them.
And understanding those stories, that's crucial if we want to move towards a more just and equitable society. It's not about finding a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
It's about recognizing the nuances, the complexities of each group's experience.
So where do we go from here? Yeah. We've uncovered all these alarming statistics, explored the history, the systems. Like,
It's a lot, yeah.
it's a lot to take in, you know?
It is.
What can we do with this knowledge?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The book doesn't offer any easy answers,
Right.
but it gives us a framework for understanding the problem, which is, I think, the most important first step.
Okay, so step one is recognizing that these disparities are real and understanding how they came to be.
Exactly.
Uh,
Then it's about action.
Okay.
It's about challenging those systems, advocating for policies that promote equity and justice, working to create a society where everyone has a fair shot.
That sounds good in theory,
Yeah.
but it also feels, I don't know, kind of overwhelming.
I
And there's-
understand.
Where do I even start?
You start with yourself.
Okay.
Educate yourself. Have conversations with people. Support organizations working to address these issues. There's so many ways to get involved.
Yeah. So it's not about like having all the answers.
No.
It's about being willing to learn, to engage, to take action, however you can.
Exactly. Change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
But it starts with each of us, acknowledging the problem
Yeah.
and committing to being a part of the solution.
This has been a real eye-opener, honestly. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how complex racial disparities are in America.
Yeah.
But it's clear, there's still so much more to learn.
Learning is a lifelong process,
Yeah.
and the pursuit of justice is an ongoing journey, really. The more we understand these issues,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to create a more equitable world.
Well said. Well, thanks for diving into this with me.
Of course, yeah. It's been a great conversation.
It has. It's been a powerful conversation.
It has.
And for you listening, I'll leave you with this. We've talked about America, but how do these patterns of inequality play out in other parts of the world? What unique challenges do different groups face in different contexts? It's something to think about. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world.